All right, welcome. My name is Dan Ficker, and this is building SEO-friendly sites with Drupal. And we're going to just get started here, I think. Well, first, I guess, about me. Sometimes I wear weird shirts in the office, I guess. But yeah, I've been a computer geek for,
Is recording for guy?
Yes, it is. Yes, the red light means it's on. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, no, I mean, I've been a programmer for 13 some years, and work at an agency in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, called August Dash. And actually, I remember, if anybody wants afterwards, I've got some Twin Cities Drupal camp stickers here. We can, if anybody wants them, we can pass them out. Or Twin Cities Drupal camp is this June, but the company I work at, August Dash, we do website design, develop, marketing. And we do have a kind of we're going to get right into it. We'll just go with what is SEO. And SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. You probably already knew that, but in case you didn't, that's what we got. The process of making your website being better understood by search engines or optimized for search engines. Search engines are kind of, basically some computers on the internet that read your website and keep information about it, so that when somebody comes along, say, the most well-known search engine is Google, of course. There's also Bing and probably, I think, DuckDuckGo is another one or something. There used to be a lot more of them too, but and what I think most people are talking about when they say SEO or internet marketing is really kind of a team of people, and this is what we have at August Dash too, is a team of people who do a lot of research on like best keywords to kind of use on your website for various things, and kind of setting kind of goals. Dwayne was talking about earlier today, like in his talk, talking about goals that you want to make your website profitable, or to meet certain goals with the functionality of your website. And so our internet marketing department definitely does a lot of that. But what I end up doing as a developer with the internet marketing team is really when they say, hey, we want to get to doing X, putting these meta tags or changing the page titles, how can we do that? And so that's what we're really going to talk about today, is how some tools that Drupal provides, as well as some Drupal modules and other things that can help us make those changes for the internet marketing or SEO team. Another thing I see pretty often is sometimes our clients use a different company than us for internet marketing or SEO, and often the first thing we'll get from them is, our SEO people say we want an FTP login to the site, and for the most part we say we'd rather not if you don't use the FTP login, or FTP is not even that secure, so probably don't do that. But generally we will try to give them some sort of tools so that they can even just log into the website and change some stuff. They don't have to muck about in learning how Drupal works to some extent. Don't have to worry about Drupal templates and that type of thing. So that's kind of our goal today, is talk about various areas that we can help internet marketing or SEO teams with improving the content on your site for search engines. And this is kind of the 6 different areas I'm going to talk about today. So we'll just jump right in. Domains, that's my vanity domain, Dan Domain or something like that. Anyway, the first thing I talk about is a lot of websites have more than one domain you can access the website on, maybe. And what we really want to do, so I got a couple of them. If you just go to danielficker.com or domain.net for some reason, those will all get you to my website. Depending on how the server configuration is set up, you could actually, the server could actually respond to each of those in such a way that each of them looks like a separate website that has the exact same content. And what we'd rather do is not have that situation. And so what we'd rather do is just configure the search engines. Search engines can get confused and say, this is 3 different websites with the same content, and we'll decide that one of them is important for X pages and one of them is important for other pages. Things can get confused. So what we recommend to probably do is redirect all of the domains except for one to the main one. So the example I mentioned there too, my website, if you go to danielficker.com, it'll just redirect to da-man.com. And it actually, it has some problems right now because of HTTPS and certificates. But the way you can do that is configuration on your Apache or Nginx, whatever your web server is. Server and hosting providers will have different ways you can do that. Drupal does have an htaccess file for Apache that will kind of give you some. Actually, there's some stuff already in there that says just comment this out if you want, or uncomment this, and then it will just do it for you. So that's one thing that's good idea to do. Make sure you have all your domains redirecting to one domain so that search engines know this domain is the main one, the www.com or something like that, and not one of the. You get domains for lots of different reasons. It's either an old brand name of the company or, some sort of marketing campaign, an alternate spelling of the brand or something like that. And so this is one way to make sure the search engines do not get confused with domains. And the next big section we're going to talk about is URLs. URLs are a major part of a website. They're kind of like the file system of the website. URLs can kind of look like, almost anything. I mean, probably remember some days or websites where you've seen where, the URL is sometimes, first of all, in URLs we have a domain and then the path, and the path is what we're really talking about here when we're talking about URLs, is the path internal to your website. I was just thinking about in the 80s or 90s, kind of these enterprise CMS systems, the URLs were mostly just like a bunches of hashes of random letters and numbers, and you're like, what does that all even mean? And apparently it's some sort of database ID somewhere. Thankfully, Drupal does a lot better job of handling those URLs than that. But yeah, first the domain part of the URL redirects you to the server, or directs you to that server, and then the path is kind of says, here's where a file is. Drupal doesn't actually have the files stored in that spot on the server, but it translates itself into saying, I see what file they're looking for, and generating that file basically with an HTML page. This is the part where I like to plead for URLs, paths of pages making some sense. So we'll talk about it in a second. By default, Drupal just actually the path by default is usually just node/something, which is not really that pretty of a title. And that's where your SEO teams may say, hey, we want the URL to look prettier than that. We want to have certain keywords in it, and we'll let them do that. But first of all, I just want to say, URLs should be organized in some intelligent way. If you have a hierarchy of content, if you have kind of sections to your website, that should be reflected in what the URLs look like. Convey hierarchy, meaning. I like to say they should be hackable, by which I mean, for example, here if you have, on my website, blog/27/10/sample-post, it's probably going to be, it probably would make sense if it's a blog post called sample post from October 2017 for some reason. And I also think if you're going to have those slashes to designate kind of folder structure within your site, that if you go to blog/2017 or blog/2017/10, you should actually get a page there that actually includes information related to blog posts in 2017 or blog posts in October 2017. And that can be a little extra work sometimes, but if you're going to have that kind of folder structure, somebody will try to just see, is there anything at this page? And it would be nice if there is a thing on there, even if there's not a URL or a link on your menu or those types of things. Another thing that has to do with both domains and URLs is robots.txt. I believe there's one there is a robots.txt included within Drupal, I believe. But it basically tells these search engines, here's what we do or do not want you to look at, and by default, there's a couple, like Drupal does. If there was anything in the admin section that was public, like Drupal or your search engines don't need to know what is in there. They don't need to index it. They don't need to look through it. So maybe you could put something in there that says don't look at admin pages.
Actually, that's the default robots text.
Yeah.
It blocks all the admin pages.
Yeah, it blocks the admin pages and some other kind of things that are just kind of internal to Drupal's back-end system, but you obviously want all your content in there. Sometimes I've seen some weird things where maybe a view is not exactly set up correctly, and there's kind of like an infinite possibilities of URL arguments or something like that, and I've found like search engines kind of eating up the traffic on our website, indexing hundreds of thousands of variations on these pages. Generally, that's something we should also probably fix in the view, but you could also use the robots.txt file to say, just don't even bother trying to index all these pages because they're not going to be helpful for you. So that's what the robots.txt thing is for. Also, I just mentioned on staging sites, you could use just disallow everything. If you have a test or staging site where you don't want this copy of the website to be indexed by search engines, the one caveat to that is make sure it never, ever, ever gets to your live website, because if it does, then the search engines are going to be like, okay, we're done, we're leaving. So, and then your clients are going to be not very happy when they say, why is no one looking at our website? First, with URLs, here we'll keep going. And by default, like I said, Drupal's internal URL structure is just node/node ID is a number that's assigned to the piece of content. Not very pretty, not very nice. So what is built into Drupal is the URL alias module, I believe it's the module. Anyway, it's pretty much there by default. You install Drupal, and right there you can put whatever you want in for the URL. And usually you could just pick something /about-us or whatever you want to call it. And that can work for some people. But we're going to look at another couple options here. There's a module called Pathauto, which basically gives you a lot more tools for handling what those URL aliases are. It requires the token module because it uses these kind of little pieces of these little bracketed keywords called tokens. And by default, it basically says for all pieces of content, instead of not giving it a URL alias, always give it a URL alias that starts with content / and then a URL version of the title. It kind of filters out spaces and some funky characters, and replaces spaces with dashes and things, so that it's kind of a URL safe version of your page title. And that's by default for all content types, and it does something similar for users and nodes if you turn it, or users and taxonomy terms and that type of thing if you turn it on. But it also can be configured to a lot of different options. Now, under the URL aliases section of the admin, there's a whole section called patterns, I believe. Yes, it's called patterns. And basically you can say for each content type, I'd rather, for blog posts, let's have it start with /blog, and then /2010, or, like the year of the blog post, the day of the blog post, / then the title of the blog post. You can even do some things where, if you are pretty sure that everything in this content type is going to have a menu item, you can actually say, the parent menu item's current path and then the title. And so then you kind of actually do get this kind of menu-based hierarchy built into the site. That can break down if for some reason those posts don't actually have a menu item, then it probably doesn't make much sense. But so there's some things to keep in mind there. But there's a lot of configuration within Pathauto, and it will just kind of, you set up these little patterns that say, for this content type, make the URL look like this, and for this other content type, make it look like that. And then just by default, when anyone creates content, you get a pretty nice, clean URL that will work for most cases. And in the admin, under URL aliases, there's an option. By default, it just checks to, use the automatically generated one. And if you keep that on, it uses it for that page. If you check it, uncheck the box, you can then set, a specific one that you can override the default. Another great module we recommend to use with Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 sites too. These apply for both sites. Is the redirect module. The redirect module basically allows you to so we talked about the internal Drupal path node/node ID, and then there's also the URL alias. The redirect is something that just points to the alias of the page. So if you have, let's see, there's a couple things. Maybe you want a nice customized short URL for this page. You have an event coming up and it's called Splash or something. And I don't know, we're talking about summer already or something. But then you can basically say, hey, I want anybody who types in mydomain.com/splash to get redirected to this page, which might be a little bit longer URL, like Splash Event 2018 or something like that is the full title of the page, and that's the full URL. And you might use that because then you don't have to write out on a poster or something like go to mydomain.com/splash-event-2018. Just go mydomain.com/splash, and that's kind of one use for the redirect. But we'll talk about a couple more here too. The other thing was it's right here actually. So when a page title changes, it actually does update. Well, any part of that pattern that we talked about in the Pathauto module, if that part changes, then it makes a new URL. Without the redirect module, anybody who tries to go to the old URL will get a page not found error, and nobody likes a page not found error. So the redirect module basically, as soon as you install it and turn it on, it says, oh, I know where this is supposed to go. There's no page here anymore, but if you go over to this new URL, that's where it'll go. And it automatically redirects all your visitors to that, from the old URL to the new URL. And then, in the admin of that, like I said, you could set your own redirects on the page. It does a couple more things too. Like I said, when it detects when it's changed, you can add your own custom redirects for any reason you want. And then it also tries to, if it notices, sometimes you change the title of the page and then you change it back. And so in the past there's been some issues where it doesn't realize it's looping infinitely in redirect land, and then your visitors never get to your page. And it tries to detect those and make sure that it automatically kind of shuts off any redirects that are causing looping issues. There are some cases where if you're looping between two URLs still, two redirects, then you can still have an issue. But hopefully that doesn't happen automatically very often. This is another Drupal 7 module called Global Redirect. And this is also kind of like we were talking about with domains, really about standardizing URLs. Drupal is pretty forgiving about URLs. There's actually a couple different URLs paths you could put into a website to get the same piece of content. And in Drupal 8, most of these features are included in the redirect module itself, so you don't need to install an extra module. But in Drupal 7, this is a good one to also probably include on your website. Let's see. So here's my little example. The main page URL is just about-me or something like that, but it also actually could be accessible at any one of these other URLs, like node/1 about-me with a slash on the end, or $q equals about-me, or index.php q equals node/1. The last couple especially are some weird if you're seeing mostly those URLs at the end, it's probably either because you're trying to trick Drupal into doing something silly, or your web server is configured incorrectly, because the question mark Q thing actually does is kind of Drupal's internal language, but it shouldn't actually be showing up for users. But what the global redirect module basically does is takes all of those last four and just automatically redirects them up to the main path. Most likely, search engines are pretty good at deciding this. These URLs are showing pretty much the same content. They're probably the same thing, but it's nice to have a redirect that enforces that as well. And that's all we have about URLs. But we have a couple more tools we're going to talk about, and the first one is XML Sitemaps. This is kind of the XML sitemap of my site, which is just a bunch of blog posts, really. It doesn't look this pretty, actually. This is a style sheet on top of the XML. XML, of course, is just kind of like HTML code. It's just a lot of, braces and brackets and things, and URLs. But it includes some interesting information, basically, about the URL, when it was last updated. And this is another tool that search engines like to have, or it can be helpful to give to search engines. Let's see. I think the reason I recommend the sitemap is because it's not something that visitors look at really, but it's basically the XML sitemap module. Basically, there's a couple other modules too, but XML sitemap basically just keeps a running list of all of the content on your website, and then search engines, if they come across new content and think it's interesting, will index it. But instead you give them a whole list and say, here's all of the stuff I'm interested in you indexing, and so then they can probably see it faster and get it included in their index faster. So it's just a list of all the pages. It includes some information about when they're updated and how often they may be updated. You can include with the XML sitemap module a little bit of content items, menu items, user pages if those have something interesting on them, taxonomy term pages, and there's an option even with the module to submit automatically the information to Bing or Google. Google and Bing generally do have a URL that you can say, hey, I've got a new sitemap, here's the file. And so there are a couple other ways to do that too, and we'll talk about those. I guess what I would say too with XML sitemap, in Drupal 8, it's still kind of an early alpha or beta version of the module, and the administration interface definitely is not working perfectly yet. It can be a little confusing to configure it, as well as I found you have to kind of there's a link in there to rebuild the sitemap at least once after you configure. What you have to do is go into each content type and say, yes, I want to include this in the sitemap. And then after that, generally I rebuild the list, because otherwise it kind of just includes the home page in the list, is what I found. So hopefully that's helpful in getting it working. But the other thing we can do with sitemaps is, especially for Google is by far the biggest search engine, but the Google Search Console is it's actually, they're doing a new design which looks even more exciting than this, but it looks kind of more like the new version of Google Analytics. But the Google Search Console is at google.com/webmasters, and all you need to do is kind of verify that you are the owner or manager of that site. There's a couple ways you can do that, and they walk you through it pretty quickly. If you have Google Analytics or can set DNS records or set a file on the server, you can verify the site. And through there, you can actually manually submit your Google sitemaps or your XML sitemaps. And if you want to, after you submit it, you get actually information like Google could tell you some information like, hey, it says I should include this page, but this page is actually blocked by the robots.txt file, or I can't access that page because actually it gives me a 500 error or a 404 error. So It's good to kind of look at that occasionally. Google, well, once you you have to log in with a Google account once you log into this Webmaster Search Console. And once you have that too, then Google can actually contact you, email you, and say, hey, we noticed your website has malware on it, or something's really weird, errors are happening on your website. So it can be nice to get that information as well. Google, once you verify your site with Search Console, Google actually knows, hey, this is somebody I can actually reach out to say, hey, I'm noticing weird things on your website. So that can occasionally happen too. There's even a way in there too, if they do detect malware or something and start, and they detect something's wrong with your site and they start penalizing you and down indexing you, you can reach out to them through that too and say, hey, I fixed everything, could you please let me back in now? And that can be helpful as well. Let's see. Got a couple more things to go here. I'm running through this pretty quick, aren't I? Okay. Meta tags are another important part of your website. And most of this stuff is just data that the search engines can look at. First of all, we have the page title. The page title is pretty self-explanatory, but within each piece of content, you have a title, but the title is not necessarily the page title. The page title is actually the title tag that is shown at the top of the page. It usually shows up as the name of the tab or the window in your browser. And by default in Drupal, when you install Drupal, there's a site name that you set up where you can change it in the site information page in the admin. But by default, every page's page title is the content title, the title of the node, or whatever you're looking at, the view or something, and then the title of the site. And that's the default Drupal 7, Drupal 8 configuration. And this is a pretty useful default because it kind of reinforces the H1 content of your page and your page title are going to have the same title, the same keywords, and it's going to have the name of your site in there too in the page title. And those are usually some of the most important keywords on the page anyway. But again, we can use some tools to make that even better. And the module here we're going to talk about is called Metatag, and the Metatag module will do even more for setting page titles, as well as some other information. Again, it uses the token module to kind of use those kind of bracketed keywords that have to do with information on your website. And like the Pathauto module that we talked about earlier and the token system it uses, you can basically, for each content type, taxonomy term page, user profile page, you can set kind of a default, like, let's see, for the page title should be this. There's other meta tags called like descriptions or keywords, and it sets basically pretty sensible defaults. Most pieces of content will have like a body field, and so it actually uses the summary of the body field as the description of the content. And there's also like a meta tag of the canonical URL, which actually will always put in the URL alias for that page as a meta tag by default too. So that kind of also reinforces that we said this is the URL that you're supposed to use for this page. So there's a lot of different things the meta tag module can do. It's a lot of little HTML code that goes in the top of your page. But you can also customize the page title, the description, the keywords, any of these really, through a little admin screen we'll talk about here. And you can set per content type again, like use this kind of pattern for this content, use a different kind for another piece of content. And there's even some meta tags that have to do with telling search engines don't index this page. There's even a couple more meta tag submodules for what they call Open Graph, which is used for like Twitter and Facebook card things that when you share a link, just pops up a little card with an image and a title of the page, a little description maybe. So there's some options in there too that you can say, hey, I just want, when somebody shares a link of Twitter and Facebook, that looks a little fancier, and that just adds those meta tags you can customize it again further. Yeah, and then here's an example of just kind of when you install the Metatag module. Like I said, you can on the content type page say here's the defaults for that content type, or it's on the Metatag admin page. But when you're editing a page, you'll actually see too, like here's the pattern we're going to use by default if you don't modify it. But on any page, you can, in this little vertical tab here at the bottom, you can say, actually, I don't want to use the default body field for the description. I'd rather write my own description, or I'd rather write my own page title. And if your internet marketing department or whoever's editing the content is really interested that much in setting, not using the default and setting it to whatever they like, they can actually do that right through the administration interface of the website. So there's a lot of options there. Another one that I found just recently that I think is pretty interesting is called Real-Time SEO, and it actually uses a plugin that is pretty popular in the WordPress world. It's a Yoast SEO plugin, and it actually uses a Yoast API and gives it a bunch of information about here's what the page meta tags and descriptions and things looks like, and it actually then gives you a little picture of like what it probably will look like in Google or Bing, and also some information. And then also some information about like you can make actually better. You can even put in a keyword that you want to rank pretty well on, but it would also say, hey, your page title could be longer, and you could put more keywords in there. So it could give you some kind of tips and secrets. Well, I don't know what secrets, at least tips. But it gives you some ideas how to improve the content of your page for search engines if you're trying to get into it.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah,
about that?
go for it.
How does it know what keywords? I mean, is it taking keywords from the meta tag?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's looking at kind of a lot of the same things that the search engines do look at.
Well,
it's kind of the meta tags and stuff.
Yeah, but Google stopped looking at looking at the keyword meta tag.
Yeah, I mean,
You type in the keyword.
well, I think at the top you can say a focus keyword is kind of, I'm looking at, how well does this keyword rank, but it does look through, the content of the page, what's on the H1s and H2s, and I believe some of that other stuff, to try to see. It at least gives you some tips that might be helpful. I haven't used it too much on most of our sites, I'd say, but I think for someone who is interested in writing more SEO-friendly content, it could be helpful. It like a lot of these, it's I don't know. I think there is a certain amount of like within Drupal, like I'm giving a lot of ideas of here's a bunch of modules you should install, and I'd say most of these you should install. This one is maybe more like it could be helpful for you. It might not be helpful. There's a certain point within Drupal 2 that kind of every module you add makes your website milliseconds slower, or maybe even more than that. And so, you don't want to have 500 modules on your website. But, if this is important to you to have, really good SEO, and that your content editors are really looking at what they can do to improve SEO, this might be the type of tool that would be helpful. Another up-and-coming area is called RDF, or schema.org. And this is kind of like hidden metadata in the page, like meta tags, that is a little bit more contextual. Drupal Core does have an RDF module. I'm actually not even sure if it's actually turned on automatically, but I believe it is. But RDF is an open standard, and with the W3C, and basically it's some extra little attribute tags within the pages, divs, spans, and other things that say, this is a certain kind of data. I know, like, when you turn on the RDF module, the author information and the posted by information will have a version of it that's kind of the posted by usually just says date posted, and it is a date format that's whatever you set. And this will actually include like a very standard date format within the like metadata of the page that you can't actually see, but search engines and other robots that search around the internet could use this data to find some more information. I know, like if you actually use the address field module, it will also include the whole address information. It will say this section here, is a this section here is the address part. This section is the city. This is the state. This is the zip code or country name, that kind of thing. So that's where RDF can become pretty helpful. I don't think. Let's see. Drupal 7's RDF does not do a ton. That really helps, in my opinion. Drupal 8, I think, has a lot more built into it. We'll talk about that here too. Schema.org is kind of an extension of RDF. It's also, you do a couple different standards like JSON LD or some other different types of like including metadata in your page. But for Drupal 7, the schema.org module basically extends the RDF type system by adding in the content admin area. You can say this piece of content is it's a job listing, or it's a location of a place, or it's a location of a store or something like that. And then even for the subfields, you can actually say like this field is if you did do a job listing or something, you could say like this field is like what kind of pay, if it's going to be full-time or part-time or that type of thing. And this is a new one actually our clients have been asking about a bunch, because like Google recently said, hey, if you put the schema.org information on job listings, then when people search for job listings, we'll actually not even go to your website, but just show like, here's a bunch of job listings on a Google page or something like that. And it's one way to kind of not just say, here's a page that has some interesting content, like here's a piece of a page that has even more specific content that you can do kind of whatever you want with. And it can be nice. Maybe, I don't know, people may not be going to your website as much to view this information, but maybe they're more easily finding the information that they're looking for if they are and are not looking for your information. Let's see. Yeah, I think much of the schema.org information is included in Drupal 8. If you want to configure it a little bit more in Drupal 8, looks like there's this RDF UI module that will allow you to kind of, in the UI, again, I think set some more of those type information and field information. This is not an area that I've looked at a ton, but I think it's a very interesting place to look in the future. And I think more and more internet marketing groups and SEO people may be looking at it. So that's what I have to say about that. But the last section I'm going to look at here is really talking about tracking scripts. So that's actually just a boring graph from my Google Analytics page. But what I'm really talking about here is internet marketing folks, especially if they're working with an advertising company, or if you're sometimes even now I know some of our clients are even doing like paid or like radio ads or TV ads, and the ad company still even says, or ads in the paper or something, and the ad is like, we want you to stick this piece of JavaScript on all your pages or one of the pages in order for us to track some more information. I don't even know how it works exactly, but this is maybe some ways you can help them do that. First, I mentioned Google Analytics is a free analytics tool provided by Google. It basically, you install this little piece of code on your page, and basically Google just gets a lot of information about who's visiting your web page and puts the nice graphs to it. You can do a lot within it. I don't even know all of the details, but you can set up like goals. You can, if you have e-commerce, include some more information after an order saying this is what they ordered, this is how much they ordered, and you can actually tie that back to ads saying people, if you bought ads on Google, you could say, how much did my ads actually get me? Or how many times did they actually fill out X form or buy X things after they bought an ad? And so that's where you can really get kind of that information on return on investment. The Google Analytics module for Drupal is a pretty good one. I mean, if you want to, you could just include in your page template for your whole site the little piece of Google code, and that might be just all the information you want for Google Analytics. The Google Analytics module does a couple extra pieces of JavaScript in there. For example, you can tell it to actually send Google an event thing when you click on a file download or when you click on an external link, so you can kind of keep track of like where people are going a little bit further than the default Google Analytics code gives you. It's also pretty easy. You don't actually even have to copy out this huge block of code. You just have to copy out your little ID number and paste it into the admin of Google or of Drupal, and it will automatically put the Google Analytics code right in your page. There's a couple of other things. So, like I said, some of these websites have a lot of these little JavaScript pieces of tracking codes or JavaScript. Sometimes clients will use something with tools like Crazy Egg, which is another type of analytics tool of like where people are moving their mouse around on their website or clicking on different parts of the page, and those can be helpful. What I've found is this Drupal 7 module for tracking code. Really, it gives you kind of a really easy way in the admin to say, hey, this little piece of JavaScript, I want it at the top of or in the metadata area of the page before the body tag in the head of the page, or I want it at the very, very bottom of my page. And it kind of sticks it in those places that JavaScript usually goes. And you can also, like you can with blocks, say, I want to show it on only these pieces of content, these types of content, or only on these paths, or even not on all pages, but not these paths, that kind of thing. So this is just one of those tools where you could say, hey, on this, thank you page for the contact form, instead of actually editing the template of that page or the content of that page, just go install the tracking code module and say, hey, just on this page, include this piece of JavaScript. That one, tracking code module, we've used in a lot of Drupal 7 sites. I believe, I've not looked at it too much, but there is a module on for Drupal 8 called Asset Injector that actually, you can inject both JavaScript and CSS. And I think you can do even a little more complicated things with it. The other tool you could use is something like Google Tag Manager. Is becoming more and more popular. And that is basically like Google Analytics, just a piece of Google code you put on every page, and then in Google's website you can actually do a lot of these same types of things. So on Google's website you could say, in the Tag Manager interface, you can say, hey, only on this page add this piece of JavaScript, or on every page but this page or that other page, just include the JavaScript here. So it's pretty impressive what they got in there, actually. Like, you can kind of like put stuff in there and kind of keep it unpublished for a while and then publish it when you're ready and that type of thing. So we've started using that a lot more on sites instead of actually putting it right into the website template or even installing this tracking code module. The last thing I'll mention here is a Drupal module called Site Verify. When you use stuff like Google Search Console, or you want to get the search engines, let's see. There's a lot of things. You can even a lot of things. Companies want to verify, hey, do you actually own this website? And they'll usually give you a couple different ways to do that, like add a little extra meta tag in the website that identifies, like they can actually read that meta tag and say, oh yeah, you control the website because you put a meta tag in there, or you control the website because you put a DNS record in there. We talked about using that for the Search Console to get access, but there are sometimes other reasons you might do that. And so this module, Site Verify, is just a really simple admin to help you do that if you don't want to actually, for the most part, if a client says, hey, we want this little like a file uploaded to the website, I will just maybe put the file in Git and upload it to the website, and that should work fine. But if the client really wanted to do that themselves, this will give you an admin interface where you can turn on this module, and then they can upload files or add little meta tags on whatever pages they want, and just do it through the admin. So, yeah, I mean, that's another thing I mentioned too, is just I'm kind of a little bit against adding like little verification codes to meta tags, just because this one search engine is looking for it, but on the other hand, every single visitor to your website has to download this little snippet of stuff that doesn't mean anything to them. It just means to me like you're just wasting kilobytes of download speeds or something. So, like when when doing Google Search Console verification, I usually like to pick one either like, hey, this account is already associated with a Google Analytics account, and then they'll just kind of let you through, or include actually a file that's specific to Google and that Google can look for, that not everyone else has to download that content. But it's like less than a kilobyte of data, I suppose, on every page. So it's not like it's the most downloaded thing ever, if it is there. But yeah, site verification module. Also, site verify is only really now for Drupal 7, as far as I've seen. But there's other ways to get around that too. Adding meta tags in different places and adding files. So I think that's all I have for today. Hopefully I went really fast. And if anybody has any questions, I'd feel free to take them. I don't know if anybody wants. Yes.
I just wanted to mention one thing
Yeah.
when you were talking about
Tips are great too. I love those. Yeah.
redirect modules. There's one other that I like,
Mhm.
and that's match redirect.
Match redirect. I'm not familiar with that.
The redirect module does not allow you to use a wildcard.
Ah.
So if you match redirect does, and so if you have a website where you've done a lot of rearranging or something, and you want to just say take everything that was in this section and redirect, because there's not a direct one-to-one correlation with new pages.
Right.
So you just want everybody who's going to what used to be called this now to be called this. You can set it up with a wildcard and match redirect.
Sure. Yeah, so just for the recording, the module called Match Redirect that can kind of do more of a kind of matching, kind of wildcard searching kind of system. That's interesting. I've not used that myself, but any more questions, comments, anything I missed? Yeah, sorry.
Metatag module, any performance, notice any performance issues?
Well, I think, that's a good question. I guess I haven't used it on a site that has like 100,000 pages or something like that, because it is kind of stored in its own database table, but I don't think that should be a really big performance issue. I don't know of one, but you may have had some issues that I haven't experienced myself either. But I think it's pretty well used by a lot of websites. I haven't looked at on Drupal.org at the Metatag page. You can say like this many. You can see like this many. It's probably hundreds of thousands of websites are probably using the Metatag module, and so I think that performance is probably okay. Yeah.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
Very early on, when you were talking about URLs, and you were talking about them having a hierarchy and being hackable, I believe in that, and I do it. But I have one website where we have so much in the hierarchy that I now have some URLs that are like they're truncated because they're just too long.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on maximum length for useful URLs, or another way to approach that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is kind of a max. I think by default these URL systems really allow like up to 250 or 55 characters or something like that. And I would say, most likely at some point too far in there, the search engines are not really going to look at those for keywords anyway. So maybe there's a reason not to do it that way either. But Yeah, I don't know. I bet there's probably something that you could add into the token module that would say like, just cut off this, if your taxonomy term name or your page name is really, really long, cut it off a little early or something like that, or, round it down to 30 characters or something like that. And so maybe there's something like that, but I'm not exactly sure. I have seen that once or twice before and usually tried to maybe make the category or page names a little shorter or something like that. But.
On the particular site I'm thinking of, if I had it to do over, I think I wouldn't have bothered. So for example, there's 3 different kinds of blogs on this site. So rather than having, this whole path to get to that particular blog, I probably just could have, used a descriptive name of the blog and then just had the title after it. But now I'm afraid if I change it, I'll mess up the redirect.
Yeah, that can happen too, that you might get, what I have found too is if you do use the Pathauto module and you change what it is, change what the alias is, there's ways to kind of clear all those out, and it should add the redirects right in anyway. So, I would maybe try it on a dev or test copy or local copy first before you, and verify that at least, a couple dozen various pages work. But, try it out and see if you can actually reorganize the URLs. And if you have the redirects and the aliases and things working pretty well, it should kind of all redirect in the end. And yeah. If I'm missing a hand, anybody want yeah.
About schema work, if you
Yeah.
want to do a JSON implementation, there is a relatively new module called schema Metatag, and it's both available for 7 and 8, and it's actually like really, really useful and complete. So,
Schema Metatag module, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that actually will include JSON LD parts in the meta tag area of your page or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, nice. And yeah, JSON LD is one of the formats that schema.org accepts, and it's usually like the RDF usually kind of includes all the metadata in different tags throughout the page. The JSON LD kind of usually just puts it in one little block of JSON code that's to some extent it kind of duplicates the content at the top of the page or something, but it sometimes is a little easier to use that to kind of get it in the right format that schema.org wants than how your page is organized. So yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Good.
Yeah, another question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on, because the fact of the matter is with a lot of sites, we as builders or designers, we don't have much input into a lot of these SEO elements. Do an XML sitemap. A lot of the stuff you mentioned, I've already done and figured that out. But
Okay.
one of the things is trying to get our clients to actually do things like incorporate keywords and page titles. And that's not so, it's not like we can go back in necessarily, or we would get paid to go back in and rewrite their page titles to help SEO.
Right.
So,
right.
do you have any resources to direct clients to help them kind of grasp how to do stuff like that?
Well, I think, let's see. There's a lot of generic resources on kind of SEO and keywords and that type of thing, just kind of around the internet, I guess. I'm not exactly sure. I know, there's one, Search Engine Land or Moz.com, or Search Engine Land is another website, yeah, and then Moz.com is the second one. And those are some, kind of search engine news, and I think Moz.com is one of the top search engine companies or SEO companies worldwide or something. But those are maybe some good. I've definitely looked at those for some of their blog posts on how things should work. I think let's see. I think Drupal, and if you install most of these modules, I think it does a pretty good job of getting SEO to a point where it's you just write good content and your page is going to kind of just show up to some extent. But you can always kind of really get deep into oh, hey, this keyword is actually not really used by a lot of our competitors, but a lot of people are searching for it. And so maybe you want to start optimizing for that keyword instead. And I think that's where you usually get like an SEO or internet marketing company coming in because the client says something like, "Hey, we're not getting as much traffic as we want, and we want to improve that more." And so that's when you have to do a little more research on the here's what we're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of the things though is that even so, I mean, I've noticed a lot of times that clients will, for instance, title a node something that is maybe not really related, or it's to the content, or it's so generic that it's kind of worthless.
Right. Right.
You know, like, great event this week kind of stuff. I mean, what does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
And so and of course we'll see this stuff after the fact, because we're not actually adding the content ourselves.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the
So-
content admins are not really, writing content in such a way that it makes it's very helpful for the reader or for search engines in general.
Right.
I guess what I would do very often is just kind of say, hey, I noticed this, and I think it could be confusing maybe for your clients or for your customers, and maybe try just saying, hey, like, this would make more sense, I think, and just try to put them in their shoes, I guess, Yeah.
I face that same issue with clients of two most important things, but page title and page description. Page title is important for Google to find out what the keywords are so they can go there. The description is important for people who see your results on Google, what the two sentences that show up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've written a one-page description of what those elements are, what should be put in them to give to my clients, so they could write that stuff. So I can give you that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah.
I am by no means an SEO expert. I have a one-person agency, so that means I design, I build, I do a certain level of SEO for my clients, which isn't a whole lot. But I'd like to share a link that I found really useful. It's very, very simple for those of us who don't really know much about SEO, and then perhaps to share with your clients also. And it's backlink.o, so backlink and with an O at the end, .com /SEO-this-year.
Okay.
So
backlinko.com /SEO-this-year.
Yeah, and it's just got, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 tips based on what Google is really looking for right now. And it's simple. It's like stuff, if you have the opportunity to implement anything at all in terms of content or descriptions on the site you're working on, it's stuff that we can really do.
Yeah, and that's I think true. Like the page title, the keywords that you have in the URL, and actually the URL of the name of the site reminds me too. Like backlinks is what they call like links that are going to your website, and those are all kind of very important things that search engines like Google, as well as Google, will use to kind of say, hey, this is a important website. People are linking to your website. You have some important information. So.
Well, that also brings up the whole subject of backlinks and how important are backlinks to search engines.
I think these days they're pretty important because the idea, I think if no one's linking to your website, then it's like, well, maybe no one finds this useful, and so maybe that maybe the search engine shouldn't either. But I think there's also the other side of that too, where you just have a bunch of random websites that have nothing to do with your industry and nothing to do with, they're just formed with a bunch of spam links on them or something. Those aren't going to help you either, because Google's pretty smart at saying, hey, this is somebody just trying to game our system. So, that's where, like she said, every year there's kind of a slightly new thing that's going on, because Google's always trying to keep one step ahead of kind of the SEO people or the spam people that are trying to game the system that they've just created. So it's always a little bit changing, but hopefully this at least, my presentation gave you some ideas of like, here's things you can do that will at least get things started and help, if you have an internet marketing group that's doing a lot more, help them to kind of manage that without having to, dive into the Drupal code. So.
Just want to throw one other thing out there, and that is, I find that it's useful. I don't do this super often, but I find it's useful to look at server logs, because it's remarkable to me that like 98 or 95% of your web traffic is going to be bots.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was gonna say, look at server logs. That's not really that exciting because it's not gonna, like, most of it's just just noise. But
Right,
yeah,
but a couple things about it is that there are bad bots out there which you can block with HT access, for instance.
Yeah.
If you're on a page. But also it'll tell you, although you can find this out in the Google Search Console too, it'll actually tell you what pages are being indexed by Google or by Bing or by Yahoo or whatever.
yeah.
So that's sometimes worthwhile to see because then.
Yeah, in the logs, the bots will say, actually, hey, we're a Google bot or we're a Yahoo
No,
bot.
Google bot does. Bing
Yeah.
bot, Yahoo does. Although their name is something different, I forget.
Or yeah, Google might just say something some part of Google.
Well, yeah, it says Google bot
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the logs. Yeah.
But
So,
that's where I have seen a couple times where, like, we have a view configured wrong and we have a million URLs and Bing just starts trying to index all of them and they're like, why is our server so slow? And it's like, well, yeah, it's trying to index 1,000 different variations of this page, and sometimes we actually end up blocking them for a little while and then fixing the issue or something like that. So, but that's true. Yeah, looking through the logs can be helpful. But I think we're out of time. But if you have any questions for me, I'll be standing right up here. If you want a Twin Cities Drupal sticker, Twin Cities Drupal Camp coming this June in Minnesota. So, any more questions? Thanks.